Tonight, an apology for Partygate. The man responsible for the Downing Street Bring Your Own Booze invite gives evidence to the UK COVID inquiry.
I'd like to apologise unreservedly to the families of all those who suffered during COVID for all the distress caused.
Also making the headlines, efforts to reduce drugs death continue with the rollout of naloxone to reverse overdoses to every pharmacy in the country. In sport, an injury blow for Celtic, and Livingston manager David Martindale reacts to links to the vacant St Johnstone job. And pumpkin-picking fun for youngsters spending Halloween in hospital. I'm Kellyanne Woodland. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. A senior Downing Street aide has apologised for arranging a Bring Your Own Booze garden party in breach of lockdown rules in May 2020. Martin Reynolds was giving evidence to the UK COVID inquiry into the decision-making by the UK government. The former Principal Private Secretary to Boris Johnson was also asked why he deleted messages from a WhatsApp group of top officials. Here's our political correspondent, Noone.
Martin Reynolds was in charge of Boris Johnson's private office during the pandemic.
I swear by Almighty God.
The UK COVID inquiry was told messages in a WhatsApp group of top officials were deleted.
Why did you turn on the disappearing message function around the time that the Prime Minister announced a public inquiry into the COVID pandemic?
I cannot. I can guess or I can speculate, but I cannot recall exactly why I did so. I don't believe it was intended to prevent the inquiry from having sight of this. It could, for example, have been because I was worried of someone screenshotting or using some of the exchanges and leaking them.
Mr Reynolds admitted no information on the growing crisis was passed to the Prime Minister for a 10-day spell in February 2020. He also described a systemic failure to prepare for the pandemic.
Did you have plans to deal with the crisis which had broken upon the United Kingdom government in the first week in March?
I mean, as I say, there is a standard set of protocols which are actually Cabinet Office protocols for dealing with crisis. Where I agree with you is they were inadequate to deal with the crisis we were confronted with.
And the Cabinet Office failed in its prime obligation of coordinating the position, including other government departments, to ensure that there were plans and a proper strategy in place. Correct?
Correct.
Mr Reynolds was forced to quit after it emerged he'd emailed staff in May 2020, inviting them to drinks in the garden of Number 10.
Do you accept that the sending of that email and the events which ensued were again deeply damaging to trust in the government and damaging to public compliance?
Well, I think I would first like to say how deeply sorry I am for my part in those events and for the email message which went out that day. And I'd like to apologise unreservedly to the families of all those who suffered during COVID.
Tomorrow, the inquiry will hear from the former Director of Communications at Number 10, Lee Kane, as well as Boris Johnson's former Chief Advisor, Dominic Cummings. Noone, STV News.
Let's join our Westminster correspondent, Paris Gertsayanis. Paris, it's fair to say people like Martin Reynolds aren't used to being in the spotlight. So how was today's session?
Well, it made for extremely unpleasant viewing at times. Martin Reynolds was confronted again and again with examples of slow, chaotic decision-making at the top of government. And he showed that the chaos there was extremely difficult for them to handle. This is the person who controlled the flow of information to Boris Johnson, and yet he was forced to admit to the inquiry that at the crucial moment, the machinery of government did not control the situation.
And Dominic Cummings is due to give evidence tomorrow. What are we expecting, Paris?
Well, in a word, fireworks. Boris Johnson's former chief of staff was described as an agent of chaos by Martin Reynolds, someone who wanted to recruit misfits and weirdos to work in Number 10. He also compiled a list of civil servants that he wanted rid of. Now, Martin Reynolds referred to that list using language that was quite surprising to hear in a judge-led public inquiry. He said, that was one of the distractions at the top of government in early 2020. Now, we expect Mr. Cummings to robustly defend himself tomorrow and go on the attack against Boris Johnson. He'll describe him as a shopping trolley that lurches from crisis to crisis. We also expect him to refer to his own WhatsApps, published already by the inquiry, which show that as the pandemic engulfed the UK, he was one of the ones raising the alarm.
All right, more from you tomorrow, Paris. Thanks very much for that. Meanwhile, the First Minister says he has not deleted WhatsApp messages and will be happy to pass them on to the UK COVID inquiry. His predecessor, Nicola Sturgeon, and the Scottish Government's National Clinical Director, Professor Jason Leach, have been accused of clearing their WhatsApps. Opposition leaders say the row is insulting and disrespectful to bereaved families. Well, our political editor, Colin Mackay, has been speaking to the First Minister. So, Colin, what did he have to say?
Well, this row has been gathering momentum over the course of the weekend. It came up last Thursday at the UK COVID inquiry, where we heard that the Scottish Government hadn't handed over any WhatsApp messages. Now, it's since been claimed that former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and Jason Leach had deleted their WhatsApp messages from the COVID period. Humza Yousaf says the Scottish Government's decisions are not routinely taken on WhatsApp. He also admitted today that actually they're routinely deleted after a month. But he has kept his. He's happy to hand them over, although he also accepted that this whole row has created the impression of a cover-up.
I can understand why there may be that impression. I want to ensure that everybody, particularly those families that have been bereaved by COVID, really are reassured by the fact that my expectation as First Minister is that we will fully comply and hand over any material that the COVID inquiry wants.
You say that's your expectation. In the last few days since this has blown up, have you had any inquiries, investigations within the Scottish Government of officials and former ministers to find out what the situation is?
As I said at First Minister's questions, I've asked the Permanent Secretary to look into this issue and for the Solicitor General to make sure that she is also...
Have you heard anything back from them yet?
No, it's only been a couple of days. They were due to speak later this afternoon, so my expectation would be that they are reassured about the importance of complying with those do not destroy notice. And for my own part, I can say unequivocally I've kept WhatsApp messages, retained WhatsApp messages, more than happy to hand them over to any inquiry that asks for them.
Now, just this afternoon, the Scottish Government has received the Section 21 notice. They will now identify, and they say possibly even this week, provide the WhatsApp messages to the UK COVID inquiry. Tomorrow, we're expecting a statement on all of this from the Deputy First Minister. Now, the opposition are demanding that that should come from the First Minister. We might also hear from the former First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, too.
And Colin, what did he have to say about the defection of one of his MSPs to Alba at the weekend?
Well, he was actually pretty dismissive of the former minister, the former SNP contender, Ash Regan. She told me that she'd only taken the final decision to switch party last Thursday.
Over the last year, I've been on a bit of a journey, haven't I? It's been quite a year for me. And I've decided that I'm the kind of politician that I can only do politics in one way, and that is I have to do what I think is right. And this is another example of that. So I'm trying to do what I think is right. I want to be able to put independence front and centre.
And an Ayrshire councillor has also jumped ship from the SNP to Alba today. Humza Yousaf is adamant that Ash Regan should force a by-election in her Edinburgh East constituency. She says she's not going to do that. And realistically, a by-election's probably the last thing the SNP needs right now.
Right, Colin, from the Scottish Parliament, thank you. Well, other news tonight, and more than 1,000 people died from drugs misuse in Scotland last year, many of them because of opioids like heroin. But from today, every pharmacy in the country will stock naloxone, which can save a life when someone overdoses. Our senior reporter, Gordon Cree, has the story.
Through his work with the Scottish Drugs Forum, Wes has been involved in training people to use naloxone. He carries it with him out of hours too, and that helped potentially save a life.
I was in the city centre, there was a chap slumped over in a doorway. I actually knew the chap from professionally previously. So I approached him, checked him, I shouted and shook his shoulders. He was unresponsive to that. So I then put him flat on his back, did a breathing assessment. He was breathing. I've then got on the phone to the ambulance, and while I'm speaking to them on speakerphone, I've administered the first dose of naloxone, and it's improved his breathing. He's then started to become more coherent, and he's then able to respond to me, and I've just stayed with him until help's arrived and he's gone off to hospital.
And very fortunate for him that you came along, because that could have made the difference to the outcome there.
Yes, potentially, definitely. His breathing rate was really quite weak and quite shallow when I first encountered him, and I would say giving him the naloxone definitely improved that respiratory rate and gave him the best chance of survival.
Available as an injection or as a nasal spray, naloxone reverses or counters the effects of drugs like heroin, and now it's being stocked at all community pharmacies.
The principle behind this is that, similar to the network of defibrillators for dealing with cardiac arrests, a life-saving product will be easily accessible if an emergency does happen.
A pharmacy in Possil I was in last week, the pharmacist there had used naloxone in the last year 4 times. That's 4 potential savings of life, allowing crucial time for the ambulance crew to come and respond, and that could have been another number on these statistics that we all know are far too high for drug deaths in Scotland.
What I want to see happen is that we have a programme of information that's given out to communities so that communities are aware of the fact that there's going to be naloxone held in community pharmacies, and they would just make their way to that pharmacy in an emergency situation, advise the pharmacist that there is such an emergency ongoing, and the pharmacist will respond accordingly.
Figures on drug deaths are published every quarter, so there may be some clues as to whether this latest initiative is working sometime in the new year. Gordon Cree, STV News, Edinburgh.
Workers at drinks giant Chivas Brothers are being balloted for strike action which could impact festive supplies of popular whiskies. Unite the Union says Scotch whisky brands Chivas Regal and Aberlour will be amongst those to be hit hard should members vote to walk out. A pay offer of 6.4% was rejected earlier this year. Britain's oil and gas regulator awarded 27 new drilling licences today, despite criticism from climate activists. The North Sea Transition Authority said the licences have been handed out in areas with potential to go into production more quickly than others. Now, researchers are calling for osteoporosis to be made a public health priority. More than 3 million people in the UK suffer from the bone weakening condition, which can cause a broken rib by a mere cough or sneeze. They want to highlight it doesn't only affect women. Around half of those over 75 are impacted by the disease. Vanessa Kennedy has more.
Karen had no idea she had osteoporosis until she was pregnant 32 years ago. She suffered multiple spinal fractures before, during and after giving birth. She was later diagnosed with pregnancy-associated osteoporosis. She continued to have fractures for the next 20 years.
I was breaking ribs going over speed bumps in the car. I had a hip fracture after a fall. I was dashing for a train to work, actually, and slipped over. It was really slippy, wet weather, and I had 2 years as a wheelchair user. Pain is very hard to see. It's just the impact on your shape and your body, your career, your finances. It hits everything, this disease.
More than 3 million people in the UK are affected by osteoporosis, including 250,000 in Scotland, and that causes around 527 fractures every year. And while it might be something many people associate with postmenopausal women, there is some evidence to suggest that around 1 in 5 men are also affected.
Are you looking after your bones?
Now, experts at Queen Margaret University are on a mission to highlight the risk factors. They've put on workshops that replicate how it feels to have the condition, as well as cooking classes to show the importance of a balanced and bone-healthy diet.
It's really important that is done as well as possible, so with good nutrition, good exercise and vitamin D. These are all things that contribute to a good bone density. I mean, we see osteoporosis as a public health issue, really, because it does affect such a high percentage of the population.
With progression of the condition often being silent until fractures occur, osteoporosis often evades diagnosis until it reaches an advanced stage.
So today the message is to take bone health seriously and lead as healthy a lifestyle as possible to have the best chance at preventing this debilitating disease. Vanessa Kennedy, STV News Edinburgh.
Other stories in the West, and police are investigating a suspicious death in Renfrew. Emergency crews were called to reports of an injured man in the town's Renfield Street around 3 o'clock this morning. The 52-year-old was pronounced dead at the scene. Bus operator McGill's has stopped night services in an East Renfrewshire town after a series of attacks on its vehicles. The 3 and 51 services are no longer serving Auchenbach and Barrhead. Aussies say they took the decision to keep everyone safe. A key section of the M8 in Glasgow is to face closures for the next 4 nights to allow essential inspection work to be carried out. The Kingston Bridge will have several closures in place between 10 and 6 every night until the 2nd of November. Now, the nights are drawing in after the clocks went back at the weekend, and for some it can herald the start of seasonal affective disorder, sometimes known as winter depression or SAD. But thanks to new tools developed by researchers at the universities of Glasgow and Edinburgh, many are finding there is light at the end of the tunnel, as Caitlin Hutchison reports.
It's that time of year again. The clocks have gone back and the colours are changing. But it means shorter days and longer nights as winter sets in. It can be a tough time of year for Catherine, who experiences seasonal affective disorder.
I cannot get myself out into the world. I just feel very stuck. Even going to the supermarket becomes such a challenge, feeling increasingly depressed as the winter goes on. There will have just been days when you got some extra light and you do get a little boost, but then it can contrast itself with that really deep depression and darkness in your mind.
Catherine has been living with SAD for the best part of 10 years now. But a new set of techniques and coping mechanisms developed last winter have helped her see things in a new light.
We were shelter building, really embracing the inner child, and we had a sky frame workshop, basically describing the sky, your patch of winter sky, and it all very much revolved around getting outdoors, being with people and finding new ways to bring light into your eyes.
When we think about SAD, we're thinking about our psychological relationship to overcast skies and dreich weather. So encouraging people to notice the sky, notice winter colours. There's much more to winter, and we've got a creative set of prompts in order to help and encourage people to get out and enjoy winter.
An online course is now available to help people recognise and tackle their symptoms, alongside guidance on how to find community support.
Around 3% of the population experiences seasonal affective disorder, meaning around 1 million adults in the UK live with the emotional challenges that the winter months bring. But little things like getting out for a walk during daylight hours can make all the difference.
I definitely feel more optimistic. I feel I have people around me now. I've had the open conversations with family and friends. It's not that it goes away, but there are things that you can keep doing, and you have to work at it every day. You really do. But at least I don't feel alone now.
A lack of natural light during the winter months may be harmful to mental health, but small changes can help bring a little light into people's lives. Caitlin Hutchison, STV News.
All right, it's time for sport now, and here's Raman.
Kellyanne, thanks very much. Good evening to you all. Celtic have been dealt a blow with the news. Rio Hatate is unlikely to play again until after Christmas. The midfielder suffered a hamstring injury during the club's Champions League match with Atletico Madrid last week, and tests have revealed significant damage. Here's Brandon Cook.
Not for the first time this season, Rio Hatate faces a spell on the sidelines. The Japanese international has been ruled out until after Christmas following a serious hamstring injury.
I think it's a disappointment for him. He's had a bit of a broken start to this season, and obviously this year will take him over the halfway point of the league. So it's very frustrating for him, especially someone who really commits himself to his game and his professionalism. He's everything he tries to do right. So, but yeah, he's in a great place for that support.
At the weekend, Celtic were held to a goalless draw with Hibs at Easter Road. Just 24 hours later, it looked like Rangers were dropping points. For 89 minutes, Hearts led through this Lawrence Shanklin header. After missing a spot kick in the first half, James Tavernier levelled with this late penalty. Then this from Danilo reduced Celtic's advantage at the top of the Premiership to 5 points.
As I sit here 10 games in, 8 wins, 2 draws, and a team that's still developing and improving, and with a real tough fixture list away from home, then the guys have done really well, but we've got to keep pushing. But generally I've been really pleased, because, as I said, you want to make a good start, and I think we've made a good start, but there's still, 28 games, league games to go, and there's still a lot of exciting times ahead for us.
Ahead of Celtic's game with informed St Mirren on Wednesday, defender Alistair Johnson has been past fit after suffering a facial injury. Brandon Cook, STV News.
Hibs boss Nick Montgomery says the team can take confidence from their draw against Celtic. Martin Boyle had the best chance for the hosts early in the second half, but he failed to find the target. The sort side are at home to Ross County tomorrow night.
What was the biggest thing for me was the character to bounce back from a defeat, and I thought we did that in style against a very, very good Celtic side. So, definitely take confidence from that, and we're a work in progress.
Now, after being linked with the vacant manager's position at St Johnstone, Livingston boss David Martindale says his full focus is on his team's game against Hearts on Wednesday night. Martindale is amongst the favourites to succeed Stephen McLean, who was sacked after the club's 4-0 defeat to St Mirren on Saturday, with Mikel Mandron scoring twice in Paisley.
It's nice to have your name linked with other jobs, but I'm not really want to sit here and talk about St Johnstone Football Club. If I'm honest, I've got a game on Wednesday night, coming off the back of 2 poor results, so my focus is on Hearts at Tynecastle, no St Johnstone.
Motherwell manager Stuart Kettlewell is optimistic his side can upset Aberdeen on Wednesday night after claiming the Dons expect to take 3 points. The Steelmen ended a 4-match losing run after drawing 3-3 with Ross County on Saturday. Aberdeen lost 2-0 at Rugby Park, a result which moved Kilmarnock up to 4th in the Premiership.
I'd heard Barry's interview after the game yesterday. I watched the game, I listened to stuff afterwards, and I think he referenced about coming here and winning on Wednesday. I think he said about winning here and taking them into a semi-final. So we just have to put ourselves in a position where we acknowledge that the expectation is that they will come here and they will win the game. But I just think that we've had a number of performances here at home, especially where it would suggest that it's going to be a difficult place for them to come.
From me tonight.
All right, thanks very much, Rahman. OK, it's time to get the weather forecast now, and another storm is on its way. Here's Sean to tell us more.
A spell of sea air will be followed by a strong chance of you have to try these. TUI sponsors STV Weather.
A very good evening to you. Well, the Storm Centre moving on to the next letter in the alphabet this week. We've got Storm Kieran waiting in the wings in the Atlantic. Wednesday through to Friday, he's going to sweep his way in, mainly affecting England, Wales and the north of France. That's where the storm track takes it. Strongest winds and the heaviest rain. Here, though, we will see quite a bit of rain Wednesday through to Friday, mainly for eastern parts of the country. And of course, we know it's the east where we've seen the worst of the rain in recent weeks. So we don't really want much more, but there is going to be quite a bit later on the week. At least things are quiet out there just now. A lot of dry weather, clear spells around, nippy old night. Temperatures down to about 3 or 4 degrees Celsius. But that means into tomorrow, a dry, fine, sunny start to the day. We'll hang on to that sunshine for many of us through the afternoon, and temperatures rising up to highs of about 8 or 9 degrees Celsius. So not feeling too bad in that sunshine. And those leaves finally starting to dry out, turning quite crunchy through the day tomorrow. It doesn't last though. Back to soggy old leaves Wednesday. Heavy rain coming through the first part of the day, then sunshine and showers during the afternoon. But the wettest conditions, as I said, will be in eastern parts of the country. Some eastern parts looking at as much as around 50 to 60 millimetres of rain. This is Wednesday through to Friday. But look at us here in the west. Oban, just 10 millimetres of rain. So it looks as if across Argyll and Butte we'll see the driest weather later on the week, but very wet the further east you are. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV Weather.
And finally, as if you didn't know, we're almost upon Halloween, and that means pumpkins, or turnips, of course. Now, a farm in East Lothian is making sure even children in hospital can join in some pumpkin picking fun. Our reporter Amy Flett has been along to see some of their spooky creations.
Yeah. Decorating pumpkins is undoubtedly one of the best parts about Halloween, but for a child in hospital it can be tricky to get the full experience. That's why here at the Edinburgh Children's Hospital Charity Hub they've brought a pumpkin patch to them. 13-year-old Hannah has spent a lot of time in the sick kids this year, but that doesn't mean she's had to miss out on the fun activities Halloween brings.
It kind of gives you a sense, sort of relief that children that are in hospital for Halloween, if it's their favourite time of the year, they can still celebrate Halloween whilst being in hospital. So that kind of makes me happy.
She's in a wheelchair now, so it's a bit more difficult to kind of push a wheelchair around the pumpkin patch and things, so it means she can do it all here as well.
When you are in hospital, you are maybe feeling isolated, you're in your room, you can't really do anything. So having a pumpkin patch where the young person has to come down, they're feeling motivated to get out of bed, to make that effort to come down here, and I think that is so important.
And all the pumpkins have been freshly picked from this pumpkin patch at Kilda Farm to be hand-delivered to some very excited youngsters. Get away!
The family host a pumpkin patch festival every year and came up with the idea to donate some after their own daughter spent a brief period in the hospital.
We were in hospital with Louisa just about 2 or 3 weeks before the pumpkin festival last year was due to kick off. It was actually really Louisa's idea. She felt sad that other children couldn't go.
Even though it's just a small thing, it can make them happy and feel more included.
And after a delivery of 300 pumpkins in total, they've made sure that everyone has had their pick of the patch this year. Amy Flett, STV News, Edinburgh.
Oh, brilliant. And you know, all this chat of pumpkins or turnips, you know, the Scottish word for turnips is tumshi. And talking of tumshis, that reminds me, John will be here with Scotland Tonight just after the late news, and he's back here tomorrow at 6. Until then, good night.